Okay, I see we're streaming. I see we're recording. So I'd like to call this April 19, 2021 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Langfeld?
Here.
Mrs. Berry?
Here.
Mrs. Pardee? Mrs. Weiss?
Here.
Mr. Ertl?
Here.
Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Gould?
I'm sorry, is Mr. Gould on?
No, not yet.
Okay. Is there a motion to excuse Mrs. Pardee and Mr. Gould?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Mrs. Weiss, second by Mr. Rock. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Langfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Okay, very good. They are excused. Will all those who are able please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have a set of minutes from April 5, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Ertl. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion? Seeing none,
I
Mrs.
have a
Thomas.
question for the law director. Is it simple majority all that's needed to pass?
Correct.
Okay, because I was planning on passing and I know there's only 5 members here.
If we have, as long as we have 4 votes, then the minutes will pass.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. McConville. There's no further discussion. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Langfeld?
Aye.
Mrs. Berry?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Mr. Ertl?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Yes.
Okay, very good. The minutes are approved. We are now on to the comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. Total time allowed is 15 minutes per meeting unless otherwise permitted by Council Ordinance Number 91-25. Is there anybody here who would like to address the city this evening? Okay, I see a hand. If you could state your name and address for the record, you may take up to 5 minutes. And you are muted.
Hello, my name's Jeff Porter. I live at 2355 Miramar Boulevard. My wife and I have been a resident in this community for 40 years. I'm coming here tonight because I'm very, very disappointed. On April 14th, I called Mayor Brennan's secretary and asked if I could talk to him on a mission of peace to eliminate the snarky emails between the mayor and my wife. When the mayor came on the line, I asked, "Do you know who this is? I'm Jeff Porter." He said, "I know who you are. You are one of the biggest jerks in University Heights." He proceeded to yell at me and used the word jerk multiple times during our conversation. He said, "I'm sick of bullshit emails from your wife. You piss me off. How dare you do this?" I'm imagining he's referring to the multiple emails between himself and my wife concerning Daniel Grand. "You're the worst neighbor in the world," he said to me. When I explained that I was in municipal public service for 33 years, the mayor said, "You've dealt with people, so you know exactly what kind of asshole you are." He called us assholes multiple times. I repeated several times, "You cannot talk this way to me, Mr. Brennan." I asked if he was willing to commit in public to the names he called us. If I went to the April 19th council meeting, he said, "Go for it." He then said he'd wear it as a badge of honor because we are such assholes. He called me a psychopath and hung up on me. I've spoken to several attorneys and a law director that represents several communities. And I asked them, what should I do? You know what the law director told me? Unequivocally, city council has to be aware of these actions. Mr. Brennan, Mayor Brennan, and City Council, I must remind you of the one-party consent laws. This conversation was recorded. In a nutshell, these are the words he used in expletive-filled yelling rant at me. Jerk, asshole, psychopath, bullshit emails, piss me off. Yes, I'll admit to it. I'll wear it as a badge of honor. I will pass variances to any issues against you. Then he hung up on us. This gentleman represents you. He represents our community. I'm going to speak to department heads now. If Mr. Picorni, if someone in your service department talked that way to one of the community members of the community, what alternative would you have? I asked the fire chief or the police chief if members of their departments talk this way to members of the community, what would they have to do?
You have 1 minute left, Mr. Porter.
I don't have any time left at all. I'm finished. It's up to city council to decide what to do. But again, if I don't get some support here in less than a minute, I've never been big on media in all the years that I was in public service. But people can't talk to me that way. And if I don't get some sort of response out of this, I'm going to have no alternative. Either seek legal assistance or go to the public media. And if my minute's over with Mr. Brennan or Mayor Brennan, it's over. But I've spoken enough. I'm sad. This is very, very sad. This is sad. This is sad, you guys. This is sad.
Your time's up, Mr. Porter. Thank you.
Mr. Porter, I'm sorry that you were spoken to that way. Nobody should have ever, it doesn't matter what position, ever speak to another resident like that.
Mr. Porter, since this is a pretty big accusation, this is the first time I'm hearing of this. You said you had a recording of this. Is that something that you could supply to City Council? Yeah, you're on mute.
Yes, it's a recording, but I've also made a transcription of it.
And before I would provide that to you, I think I'd have to talk to some legal counsel.
But every word.
That's all recorded.
Most of it was easier to.
I don't know if Mr. Brennan's conversation was recorded, but he should have.
Yeah, I think
Mr.
that's.
Porter, I'm really sorry that
Go ahead.
you're having to tell us this. Having that recording and transcript would be helpful.
Okay.
The only thing.
After I talk to an attorney, I think
I
one of the
understand.
attorneys I've been talking to might be in this Zoom right now. But before I go any further, I have to talk to an attorney.
Mr. Porter,
This is
thank you so much
disturbing.
thank you for speaking with us this evening. The mayor is our colleague and is my colleague, and this is the first I've heard of this, and I've only heard what you have to say. It sounds like you're a fairly fair-minded individual and would understand why I would want to hear from my colleague and hear their point of view as well. I will also tell you that while this council can censure, this council can, say what it wants to say, it does not. Mayor Brennan is not our employee. You, however, are a citizen of the city. Is that right? And have the capacity to recall any elected official, myself, any member of council, or the mayor. And there is a process by which that can be done. That's Section 3 of Article 4 of the city charter. And so if you need information on that, I believe it's the clerk of courts or clerk of council who would provide that information. But, I just wanted to make you aware that any citizen of this city can petition for the removal of any elected officer. That power is vested in the citizens of our city, not in the council.
Sir, the reason why I'm going before you is, one, Mayor Brennan told me, go for it. I'll wear it with a badge of honor. And then after speaking to several attorneys and a law director that represents several communities, he said unequivocally, this has got to be reported to city council. It's up to you people now. Why don't you interview Mr. Brennan and ask him if he said it?
I think your 5 minutes is up, Mr. Porter. Is there
They're
anybody?
asking me questions, Mr. Brennan, and I'm just responding.
This is not a
I'm
back.
asking you, Mr. Brennan, did you say these words to me?
This is Thomas. Go ahead and mute Mr. Porter. He has exceeded the 5-minute time allotment. I said many things to you, Mr. Porter. I stand by everything I said. And if this council even began to know what you have put this city through, what you've put the city employees through, and the exceeding patience they have all had with you through this process, before the point where you went ahead and imposed on my assistant and insisted on being placed on hold until I was done with the Zoom meeting, even after I told you that we were not going to afford you any more meetings, and you insisted on having your own meeting yet again. When you have cameras on your neighbor's property and you report to me at all hours of the night, and you report to the police department all hours of the night of happenings going on Mr. Grant's property and elsewhere in the community using surveillance cameras from your vacation home in Florida, and you are wasting the city's time and resources, hours upon hours, pages upon pages. You may have a recording, and the public records will reflect everything else. The CAD entries will reflect everything else. The emails will reflect everything else. The calls to our dispatch center will reflect everything else. The hour that our police chief spent with you, the time that our building commissioner spent with you, the hundreds of dollars that your wife says she spent on color copies of pictures that were then dropped off here. The time that I, yes, agreed to meet with you and offered to meet you in our parking lot when the city hall building is closed to the public, and somehow you managed to make your way in and you were in our lobby in a closed building, in a building that's closed to the public during a pandemic. When this is the way you comport yourself and this is the way you carry on, yes, I called you a lot of things and I stand by those things, because at some point, somebody needs to say and speak up for what is so. And I stand by what I called you, because really, if everybody here had put up with what we had put up with over here, they could certainly reach that same conclusion. They're free to reach another conclusion. I stand by what I said. In full transparency, sometimes things are said that are not pleasant, but they were honest. And yes, you are blocked because you had your 5 minutes of time. You wanted to know what I had to say, and I got to say it. And thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your time. I am grateful that today at this public meeting you were limited to 5 minutes compared to the hours and hours and hours of time and resources the city has had to spend responding to your multiple inquiries and demands for meetings. So, thank you. Is there anybody else who would care to address the city this evening? If there's not,
Ms. Zach has her hand up.
Yes, I'm trying to unmute her. She's unmuted.
Thank you.
okay. Mrs. Sachs, you have if you'd state your name and address, or for the record, you have up to 5 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. Sherry Sachs, 14474 Summerfield Road. I don't know Mr. Porter. I do know that people should not use that language, especially in the office of a mayor, a council, to each other. There are ways to handle challenging situations. And I'm appalled and saddened that the mayor just doubled down. And I've seen this behavior in other meetings, mayor against council. And I'm astounded. And I would hope, Mayor, that if there are challenging situations in life, both professional and personal, that you seek assistance to deal with it rather than resort to base name calling. And, it's just very, I don't know what other word to use. It's appalling, no matter what the situation. So yes, it sounds like a challenging situation. I'm sure it'll be presented both sides, but please, I'm begging you to refrain and control yourself from using that kind of language, whether it's in public or private. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Sachs. I appreciate your comments here. I will tell you that, I expect very high standards out of all of our employees. I would not tolerate that kind of language out of any of the employees here. But at the same time, I'll always go to bat for my employees. And when I have somebody like Mr. Porter who comports himself the way he does, treats the employees here the way he does, there is one person who will stand up then on behalf of the employees. I would not tolerate our police chief or our building commissioner or anybody else using that kind of language with respect to Mr. Porter or any other resident of the city. But there is one exception I will make, and that exception is for myself. I will stand up for our employees. I will tell people when they are acting out that their behavior is inappropriate, and I will use language that is blunt and to the point to do so. And that may be unsavory to some, but it was exactly the right word here to describe the way that Mr. Porter was comporting himself, handling himself, and going about wasting the city's time and resources. We will handle things with regard to his neighbor as appropriate when it comes to any violations that may have occurred or may still be occurring at the Miramar property. We will do that for the sake of the entire community. We are not a concierge service for one set of residents who insists on contacting the city around the clock to complain about things that they observe on their cameras from the comfort of their vacation home in Florida. So that said, I'm noticing you're blocking us. If we were in a public meeting in a meeting room at City Hall or at the school district, you would not be allowed to disrupt the public meeting at this point, and you would be asked to leave. Fortunately, through technology, we don't have to do that here. At least not yet. But your comments are all noted, Mrs. Sachs. Thank you. Is there anybody else who care to address the city this evening?
We had one more. Ms. Holzheimer?
Very good. Ms. Holtzheimer, you have the floor for up to 5 minutes. If you'd state your name and address first for the record.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Katie Holzheimer, 2365 Fenwood Road. I tuned in to our meeting tonight just to sort of see what's going on in the community. And apparently I ended up in a sort of hornet's nest here. But Mayor, I have to say the way you handled the meetings, the Planning Commission regarding this variance was professional and thorough. Your final message was, if you see anything that is not what it is supposed to be, please let me know. So that was my last message, and I was very happy with that. Apparently there's things going on that I don't know about, and I'm not asking you to explain it, but it sounds like this issue with the neighbor of Jeff is not resolved. So, you know, I guess I just am concerned about that. And that's all I want to say, except Mayor, thank you. I did receive a little plaque about my commitment to the policing practices in University Heights. Thank you for that, because it was a joy to serve, and let me know if there's anything more I can do on that. But as a concerned member of the community, I'm hoping this conflict is not deep and prolonged. I love our city, and we all do. So that's all I have to say, and thank you for the time.
Oh, you're welcome, Ms. Holtzheimer. And to be clear, you know, the issues around 2343 Miramar are continuing, and they will continue to receive the city's attention in due course, in the normal course, to ensure that the city's laws are being enforced, and that the city's zoning code is being enforced. And we are doing that for the benefit of the entire community. So that is something that is ongoing. And you can be assured that one neighbor who may have some legitimate complaints, no matter how he goes about stating them, will neither deter or undermine that effort. So, thank you. Is there anything for any other further comments from the audience? Well, if there is not, then I will move on to my report. At the public comment period at our last meeting, we had a resident who expressed his concerns with the Dollar Tree store at Cedar Center and its then current conditions. Going back to late 2020, on November 30th and then December 14th, the Fire Prevention Bureau shut down the Dollar Tree due to conditions including obstructions in aisles, blocked exits, and blocked fire equipment conditions in their storage room. Prior to that citizen complaint, our fire inspector had visited the store 3 times since the first of the year. Since that citizen complaint 2 weeks ago, our fire inspector has been out again and observed conditions that required further remedying. At the same time, some issues that the citizen may not have been aware of have been improved. It does appear the store has had high turnover in management. It appears our inquiries may have resulted in a part-time manager being promoted to full-time in an effort to bring the store into compliance. The county health department was also out this last week, and we are continuing to monitor the Dollar Tree store. We will continue to promote safety there for both shoppers and the employees working on the site. May has been Bike Month in the city of University Heights. With the first meeting of May, we can expect to have a resolution incorporating Heights Bicycle Coalition events, including the May 19th Ride of Silence, which locally starts from the John Carroll University campus, and the Bike to Work Day on May 21st. But here's a date you may want to get on your calendar now before our May 3rd meeting. On May 4th, the Heights Bicycle Coalition will be hosting a town hall on Zoom on Tuesday, May 4th at 7 p.m. This event is an excellent opportunity to ask questions, make comments, and express ideas regarding cycling in the Heights area. You can sign up for the HBC Town Hall on Facebook and get the Zoom login information there. Today, Future Heights announced the recipients of the Spring 2021 Neighborhood Mini Grants for Cleveland Heights and University Heights. Included among them were the Friends of the Walt Volunteer Group, who has been weeding and cleaning Walter Stinson Community Park numerous weekends since August 2020. They are planning a spring planting in mid-May, and proceeds from the mini grant will be used to help defray their costs. Thanks to Iran Shiloh and the rest of the folks in the Friends of the Walt Group for their ongoing efforts. And thank you to Future Heights for recognizing the community effort in our community park. Also, receiving a mini grant here in University Heights is the University Heights Symphonic Band for their 50th anniversary celebration. Be sure to catch the UHSB at a free concert on July 1st at 7 p.m. outside at John Carroll University's Hamlin Quad, kicking off our Return of Summer concert series. Last Tuesday, I made public comment at the April meeting of the State School Board in support of a resolution they are considering in support of House Bill 1. House Bill 1 addresses at long last the DeRolf decision, finding unconstitutional the funding disparities between districts with high property values versus those with low property values. House Bill 1 will improve the balance between state and local contributions to school funding. The bill's strength is in the way of calculating the local capacity, together with improving the balance between state and local contributions to school funding. In addition, House Bill 1 calls for direct state funding of school vouchers rather than deducting those amounts from public school districts. All of this combined would greatly improve funding to our local school district and would put off for some time the need for another school levy. The next meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee on Policing Policies will be Wednesday, April 28th at 6 p.m. We will have completed legal review of the committee recommendations on use of force policies and be able to go over changes made since last year as a result of public input, as well as the department updating practices based upon case law and legislative initiatives. The public input portion of this process began with the murder of George Floyd as a result of the excessive use of force. Today, the jury heard closing arguments in the Derek Chauvin trial, and jury deliberations are underway. Meanwhile, the events in Brooklyn Center with the shooting death of Daunte Wright by police during a traffic stop, and in Chicago, the death of a 13-year-old named Adam Toledo, who was unarmed when he was shot and killed in an alley at the end of a police chase on foot, tell us that we cannot let up, that we must all keep working at this. Most mornings, my wife's parting words to me are, "Don't be a jerk." And after the death of Adam Toledo, her parting words became, "You're the safety director. You're in charge of a police department. What will you do to make this better?" And I've thought about that a lot these last few days. And really, I've thought about that a lot since the moment I got here. From the selection of a chief whose calm demeanor sets the tone from the top, to the ongoing professionalization of the department, including the review of the use of force policies, to emphasizing the guardian role of our police department and the opening of the Office of Community Policing, through training opportunities, and even through our city's first celebration of National Night Out. We will continue to work towards having our police department be a positive and helpful presence in our community. Our chief, our command staff, our detectives and officers have my confidence. None of us are perfect, and we all keep working at it. Around the country, we hear the calls to defund the police. I'm here to tell you that no public institution ever got better by under-resourcing it. Simultaneously, I am mindful that across this country, it is all too common that the best funded and perhaps the only well-funded institution in a child's life may be the police department. We fail these kids in every other way. We all must do better, and we will continue to do our part locally. One final bit of business, the annex at 2245 Warrensville is up and running again, after nearly a month of no working internet or phones. The switches necessary to restore stable and reliable service at both the Building and Housing Department building and the 2245 annex were installed on April 9th under our emergency repairs contract with Starfish. When we had special meetings last November on replacing the firewall, Starfish identified then these switches as needing replacement and recommended it be done. They had not yet failed as of that time, so after much discussion, we declined then to do so. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, internet was out for several days. Excuse me, Safe Belt took over at building, and then out for about a month at the annex where our economic development department would normally work. This was avoidable. Now, whether we're talking about equipment replacement schedules or the advice of our own consultants, we are here to serve the community. And when we wait for things to break before we replace them, then service is disrupted. Sometimes this cannot be avoided. We make a lot of demands and have high expectations on our building and housing department, our economic development department, indeed, all of our departments. I always say that the city's biggest assets are the people that work here and serve the community. With that, they need the tools in order to serve, be that working internet or working vehicles or equipment or facilities that work. With our recent work of the Strategic Planning Subcommittee, I am hopeful that we are committed to doing better in all these regards. And it is with that piece of work that brings us to the first agenda item of the evening. So that concludes my report, and I turn now to the agenda. Agenda item A is a motion to approve the site due diligence services on the proposed redevelopment of the city center complex at 2300 Warrensville Center Road by GPD Group in an amount not to exceed $45,800. Mr. Cheney, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Last week on, I believe it was April 14th, we made a presentation, two colleagues of mine at GPD, Mo Darwish, our Senior Director of Planning, and Rodwell King, one of our senior architects who specializes in master planning, about the site due diligence for the city center or City Hall campus, as I call it, which includes police and fire and building and service and various other departments that aren't on the campus. And we made a presentation about doing the site due diligence to the committee, and which includes geotechnical study, environmental, stormwater management, interviewing all the directors for their needs of their departments, and memorializing it and putting it all in a report. So we made that presentation to the committee, and I believe that's why it's on the agenda. They're recommending it to the full city council, and we are ready to begin as soon as we are authorized. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Are there any questions for Mr. Cheney? Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank Mr. Cheney and his team for the excellent presentation in the Strategic Planning Committee the other week. This is a huge step forward in terms of what our needs are to be not just compliant to some things which we have been grandfathered in, but just, the aging facilities, so our teams can work to their best capacity. And I'm excited for this, and I want to thank everybody for their hard work.
I too would like to thank Mr. Cheney and his associates that presented. It was comprehensive, it was thorough, and it really works well with council's and the city's plan of moving forward, because it's not just about meeting our needs now, but it's what we'll need to raise the funds for to build something that will be here long after all of us are. So thank you again, and glad you're with us.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Bleinfeld. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Any further comments, questions? And if not, is there a motion?
So move.
Very good. Motion by Mrs. Berry to approve the site due diligence services on the proposed redevelopment of the city center complex, 2300 Warrensville Center Road by GPD Group in an amount not to exceed $45,800. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor. Thank you.
I'm Mrs. Bleinfeld. Very good. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl, I can't see. Thank you. Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Next is item B, a motion to approve the rewrite of the RFP Comprehensive Zoning Code update and advertise for bids. Mrs. Drucker's been working on this. She is excused from this evening's meeting. But I think everybody on the Economic Development Committee is well aware of the work. Mr. Rock, did you want to speak on this at all?
Yes, so this came to our committee, I guess it was a week or two ago. This is a revisit of the RFP for the new zoning code. We bid this out a few months ago, about a month ago, and only had one respondent. And we would like to get a more diversity in our responses and more diversity in the cost to do the work. So we worked as a committee to figure out how to sort of rewrite the RFP, and Ms. Drucker brought to us a RFP that was a little more concise, a little more abbreviated, and our hopes that it will attract other firms to participate in the bid process.
Okay, very good, very good. Yeah, I can say that we went ahead and compared notes with another city that's also going through a comprehensive update of their zoning code. We compared some notes there. We've also consulted with informally with the County Planning Commission about various approaches that we could take. And with that, we did create this updated proposal, which the committee has looked at, and want to thank Mrs. Drucker for all of her strong work, as well as Mr. Rock and the rest of the committee. Is there a motion to approve the rewrite of the RFP Comprehensive Zoning Code update and advertise for bids?
So moved.
I'll make that motion to approve the rewrite of the RFP Comprehensive Zoning Code update, and then to advertise for bids again.
Very good. I heard two of you. I'm going to go with the committee chair. So the motion by Mr. Rock, Mrs. Weiss, you want to second it?
Yeah, second.
Excellent. So second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Yeah, very good. Motion carries. Next is item C, Ordinance 2021-11, amending codified ordinance section 1280.10 entitled Rental of 1 and 2 Family Dwelling Units in U1 and U2 districts. This is on second reading. Mrs. Blankfeld, this is your legislation. Did you want to speak on this, or I can go straight to Mr. McConville?
Mayor, we've discussed this many times. We know that this is a piece of legislation that a number of people in the building department and housing, and who are no longer with us, council members who worked very hard on this, who are no longer in office. It's been a long road, but it's a solid piece of legislation. I'd like to thank everybody again who was involved in it. I'm going to let our law director speak to any specifics again, although again, this is no longer on first reading, but I'll let Mr. McConville say. Thank you.
Mr. McConville, anything you'd care to add with regard to the status of the legislation?
I'm happy to go through the same type of review I went through last time if council would like me to. I know we have some residents on the call who may not have been on the call or at the last meeting, and this is an ordinance that's of great interest within the community. So unless there's an objection, I'll just go ahead and give a synopsis that's similar to what I gave at the last meeting.
Yeah, I know we have a long agenda, but I think that's a good idea, if only because it helps build the record for why we're doing everything that we're doing. Maybe for
I think it's appropriate as well. Thank you.
Mr. McConville, if you'd please proceed.
I think before we get into the specific revisions to the rental registration ordinance, it makes sense to provide some context. And in particular, there have been several legal developments that have occurred over time that have caused us to take a close look at our ordinance and revise certain provisions. In particular, a case that came out of Bowling Green called Yoder versus Bowling Green that related to an ordinance that the city of Bowling Green has that prohibited 3 unrelated persons from living together, and that was targeted mainly against students at the university living together in one home, was challenged, and the Western District for the Northern District of Ohio found that the ordinance was unconstitutional under the Ohio Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, which provides greater rights or more scrutiny for property rights than does its federal counterpart. And accordingly, that type of ordinance, which was nearly identical to ours, was deemed unconstitutional. In addition, in recent years, there have been challenges to point of sale and rental registration ordinance inspection provisions. And in particular, courts have indicated that there are Fourth Amendment search and seizure violations in connection with ordinances that don't afford residents or owners the right to refuse an inspection and cause the city to seek alternative approval through an administrative search warrant. Our ordinance was deficient under both of those types of analyses. We also became aware of a six-figure settlement that occurred in the city of Bedford under some bad facts that revolved around an set of circumstances in which a resident who complained to the police for disturbances that were being caused at her apartment was being written up by the police as the cause of those disturbances, and eventually was deemed to have created a nuisance within the city through no fault of her own. And so we wanted to take a close look at our own penalty provisions. And then finally, we were informed by our insurance counsel at Norma that should we fail to make changes to our ordinance away from the three unrelated person provisions that are deemed unconstitutional under Yoder versus Bowling Green, we might be bare on coverage issues if any lawsuit was brought in connection with that type of provision. So the genesis of most of the changes that we've made to the ordinance really are resulting from legal cases and the city's desire to make sure that the provisions within our ordinance are enforceable. Finally, I think it's important to remind everyone that the genesis of taking a look at this ordinance, going back probably about 2.5 years or so now, was a look at our fees. And we have altered our fee structure, although we have not increased fees, and that is based on a report that was generated by Patrick Rogan Myers that indicated that the fee structure does support the rental registration program, and that it runs neutrally from an economic standpoint. So having said all that by way of background, I can walk through some of the highlights of changes to the ordinance. First, we've indicated in the ordinance that permits must be obtained annually. They used to be biannual, but inspections will remain biannual. So the fees are now charged on an annual basis. They've been halved from what they used to be so that the overall fee is the same. Inspections will continue to occur biannually. And we've simplified our ordinance in terms of providing a table so that it's just easier for tenants in our building department to determine applicable fees. We've significantly beefed up our application requirements for folks who are applying for a rental registration permit. We've included the concept of a local authorized representative, which is a individual who must reside in Cuyahoga County, who is someone that the city can contact in connection with any ongoings at a rental home. We are now providing or requiring that tenant information be provided. And we're also indicating that proof must be provided that the applicant is current in the payment of property taxes. That's a provision that I think over time will be a big benefit to the city that has worked well in some other communities. Our ordinance does still draw a distinction between related and unrelated persons living in a rental home, but that distinction is now tied to space and health and safety concerns. that the city has. The ordinance indicates that a rental can be occupied by the number of unrelated persons that does not exceed the number of bedrooms in the home. And then the ordinance goes on to very strictly and specifically provide a definition for bedroom as a room that, number one, must have a full bathroom directly attached or abut a hallway leading to a full bathroom. Must be a minimum of 80 square feet with no dimension being less than 8 feet. Must contain a built-in closet and must have a minimum of 2 means of egress. Each of these provisions, it has been very specifically tied to health and safety concerns for residents who live in a rental property. We want to make sure that they have adequate space to store their stuff, adequate means of egress and ingress, and that they're living in safe and sanitary conditions. We've broadened our definition of family to include the concept of domestic partnerships, and we borrowed heavily from an existing domestic partnership definition that existed in City of Cleveland policies. And we've also provided a right of appeal to our Board of Zoning Appeals for those who are denied a permit on the basis of their ability to demonstrate that they are what we call a functional family equivalent. And we have a series of factors that the Board of Zoning Appeals can consider to determine whether a particular applicant meets that definition. In general terms, a functional family equivalent is a unit that is stable and not transitory or temporary in nature. And then lastly, we've included some specific language in our penalty provision that clarifies what owners can be penalized for, and also indicates that they cannot be penalized for police calls to a home in connection with domestic violence. That provision being in specific response to the Bedford case that we became aware of. That really hits the high points. At our last presentation, Mr. Gould made some very eloquent comments on the health and safety concerns that the committee rolled up its sleeves and got into and attempts to address in this ordinance. I think it's worth incorporating those by reference as the law director. And just for purposes of making the point that the crux of the changes that are made are for compliance with case law and to ensure the health and safety of our residents. And with that, I will turn the floor back over.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. McConville. Thank you for that extensive and comprehensive overview. Any questions or comments on the legislation or on anything that's been said thus far pertaining to this agenda item?
I would like to say that I'm delighted that Mr. McConville is going to include my colleague, Mr. Gould's thoughts and remarks. They were especially pertinent and they should be included. Thank you for that.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld.
I just want to thank Chairperson Blankfeld for your patience on this, as it's gone through, what, a dozen committee meetings over a span of several years. I'm most delighted that this legislation does include language on domestic partnerships.
Yes.
As more and more non-traditional couples are housed together or form a family together before marriage, or if they don't even get married,
Right.
domestic partnerships are becoming more of a norm. And I'm so glad that that is progressively stated here in this ordinance.
Thank you. It was a group effort. It was a very, very large group effort over a great deal of
It's
time,
very
but
thorough too.
was worth it. It was worth it.
Very good. Is there a motion?
Also move, Mayor.
Very good. We have a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-11, amending codified ordinance section 1280.10 entitled rental of 1 and 2 family dwelling units in U1 and U2 districts. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Very good, thanks. So motion by Mrs. Blankfeld, second by Mr. Rock. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next is item D, ordinance 2021-12. It's an appropriation amendment to be heard on emergency. Mr. Kennedy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. This is just to move the money from the payroll appropriation for the building department to the other expense category in the general fund. We're required to delineate salary expenses from other expenses when we file our budget with the Budget Commission. So this is going to move the salary money over to the contractual side of things, so we have sufficient appropriation to pay safe bill. At least for the immediate future, we'll probably have to do another appropriation adjustment later in the year, but this will get us enough in the contract line to process their payments for the current invoice and the pending invoice for April. The budget doesn't change. The total in the department is the same. The total in the general fund is the same. And the total for all funds is the same. It's just an internal adjustment.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions for Mr. Kennedy? Is there a motion?
Also move, Mayor.
Very good. Is it an emergency?
It is, yes.
Very good. So we have a motion to approve
Yes.
ordinance 2021-12 on emergency by Mrs. Blankfeld. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll first on the suspension of rules?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
And then on the main motion.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next is item E, motion to accept bid from NES Corporation for the 2021 Street Improvement Program as the best and lowest bid, and the entering into contract with same in an amount not to exceed $386,643. Mr. Chuney, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We opened bids for the 2021 street program last week. We had 8 bidders. Then the low bid, as the mayor indicated, is NES Corporation. The streets to be done are the same ones that were bid out last year, but we canceled because of the pandemic. And that is Glendon, a portion of Glendon, all of Fenwood, a portion of Dysart, a portion of Hillbrook, and a portion of Charney Road. New to the bid, though, was Green Road. We received some money from the county to patch and crack seal our section of Green Road, which is our half, not the Beechwood side. And that was part of the bid as well. NES Corporation, we have worked with them in the past, and we did call some of their references, and we're satisfied they can do the job. We are recommending them at the low bid is $386,643. And of that amount, $45,650 will be paid for by the county for the Green Road portion of the project. And again, we're recommending approval. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chuney. Any questions for Mr. Chuney?
No question. I thought it was interesting though, Mr. Chuney. I did a little homework, having been clerk of council all those years with Beechwood. I think it was interesting that NES was formed basically out of its former corporate entity being Cleveland Trinidad Paving, and they were around for 130 years. And now this company for another 25. So hopefully we're in good hands.
Yes, and you're exactly right. The principals of the company have been in the asphalt business for a long time. They did have a job several years ago in Beechwood that we were actually involved in. They kind of disappeared for a while, and now they're back again. So, but it's the same people, and they're asphalt people. They know they're good people. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Is there a motion?
I'll move, Mayor.
Very good. Motion by Mrs. Blankfeld to accept the bid from NES Corporation for the 2021 Street Improvement Program as the best and lowest bid and the entering into contract with same in amount not to exceed $386,643. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Berry. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next is item F, motion to accept bid from Top Level Lawn Service LLC of Cleveland, Ohio for the 2021 Yard Nuisance Abatement Program with the amounts not to exceed $35 per house for high grass, $25 per hour for shrub trimming, $25 per hour for leaf cleanup, and $30 per hour for debris removal. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. This is for our yard nuisance abatement program for 2021. The only bidder was Top Level Lawn Service. We had sent out bids to 2 other companies as well, but one of them had turned in a bid late and the other one had not bid at all. Top Level Lawn Service had provided this service for the city last year in 2020. I worked with them and they were acceptable, and I am recommending that we go with them again this year, for yard nuisance abatements. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? Mrs. Weiss.
Thank you. Mr. Corney, did we have any issues with them last year? I feel like there were a couple instances that were brought to our attention. I might be wrong.
I don't think you're wrong. I think there were a couple of issues in communicating between us and them, whether certain lots got on the list and when they were actually put on the list. So there were a couple of yards that it took 5 or 6 days to get cut, when generally if we get them on the list and notify this contractor, he gets them done within 2 or 3 days.
And how are we going to be resolving that issue so it doesn't happen again?
I will be communicating with the building department and with the contractor.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Erdl to accept the bid from Top Level Lawn Service LLC of Cleveland, Ohio for the 2021 Yard Nuisance Abatement Program with the amounts not to exceed $35 per house for high grass, $25 per hour for shrub trimming, $25 per hour for leaf cleanup, and $30 per hour for debris removal. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Next is item G, Resolution 2021-13, authorizing participation in the State of Ohio Department of Transportation ODOT 18-22 Winter Road Salt Contract. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for the annual purchase of salt. We've used the state contract for many years. The state requires that we provide them with a resolution, which I attached to the memo indicating what our tonnage usage is. And we're asking for authorization for the mayor to enter into once the resolution is adopted, allowing the mayor to sign that resolution. During the 2021 season, which is the season we're just coming out of, we used approximately 2,200 tons of salt. And that's pretty common. We sometimes get up as high as 3,000, but generally we're around 2,000 tons. In this upcoming winter season, I'm anticipating a use of 2,000 tons. We will order 1,000 tons for our facility, which we fill repeatedly, 200 tons at a time, and 1,000 tons for the Cleveland Heights storage facility, which we use once our barn is empty. And we're required to purchase 90% of the 2,000 tons, which comes to 1,800 tons. And we're also allowed to purchase 110% of our estimate, or 2,200 tons. And I'm asking council for authorization through a resolution to participate with the state contract for salt purchasing.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss to approve resolution 2021-13, authorizing participation in the State of Ohio Department of Transportation ODOT 18-22 winter road salt contract. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Thank you. Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
Okay, very good. Motion carries. Next is item H, authorization to purchase a 5-ton dump truck, cab, and chassis from the Cleveland Freightliner, Inc. of Parma, Ohio, in an amount not to exceed $88,961, with snow and ice control equipment from Concord Road Equipment Manufacturing of Painesville, Ohio, in an amount not to exceed $78,164.51. Both purchases are through the ODOT Cooperative Purchase Program, with a total truck purchase amount not to exceed $167,125.51. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for the replacement of an international 5-ton dump truck that we currently have. That is a 1996 model. It's 25 years old. Currently, we use it to haul the leaf trailer and a leaf box. So you may see that truck out on the road. It's extremely rusty and on its last leg. Luckily, it's still running, so we can still use it for the period of time that we wait for this truck to be purchased. The Freightliner cab and chassis is anticipated, if authorized, to be available possibly by October, November of this year. It's a long delay, long lead time. Once we have the cab and chassis through Freightliner, then it's a purchase of the salt and plow equipment that goes on that truck. That is also a fairly long lead time. I wouldn't anticipate that we will have this truck for the next winter. We probably will have it coming in about a year from now. The two items I specified, I gave you copies of the bids so that you could see the process that we go through. And I'm asking for authorization to purchase the cab and chassis and salt equipment on the truck at $167,125.51.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Very good. Motion by Mr. Erdl,
Second.
second by Mr. Gould, to authorize the purchase of 5-ton dump truck, cab, and chassis from Cleveland Freightliner, Inc. of Parma, Ohio, an amount not to exceed $88,961, with snow and ice control equipment from Concord Road Equipment Manufacturing, Painesville, Ohio, an amount not to exceed $78,164.51, with a total truck purchase not to exceed $167,125.51. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Next is item I, an authorization to purchase a replacement leaf vacuum trailer from Old Dominion Brush Company, Richmond, Virginia, through the National Joint Powers Alliance, the NJPA, DBA Sourcewell Purchasing Cooperative in amount not to exceed $26,594.23. Mr. Corney, you have the floor.
Thank you again, Mayor. This is for the purchase of a replacement leaf vacuum trailer. It will be replacing a 32-year-old unit, a 1989 giant vac unit. The new one will be an ODB, which is a Old Dominion brush company, which manufactures these. I attached the NJPA awarded contract. You can see a copy of the machine on the second page. The machine that we currently have is no longer used. It's in the garage. It's only used as a backup. Obviously, at 32 years old, it's reached its useful life. That was also on our replacement schedule for 2019, but due to budgeting and pandemic issues, was not purchased in 2019, or 2020. So I'm asking that we purchase it this year for the amount of $26,594.23 as bid.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mr. Erdl to authorize the purchase of a replacement leaf vacuum trailer from Old Dominion Brush Company, Richmond, Virginia, through the NJPA DBA Sourcewell Purchasing Cooperative in an amount not to exceed $26,594.23. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gould. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankenfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould,
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Next is item J, authorization to purchase a pickup truck for the service department from Middletown Ford, Inc. of Middletown, Ohio, through the State of Ohio Cooperative Purchase Program in an amount not to exceed $32,613. Mr. Picorni.
Thank you again, Mayor. This is for a replacement of a truck we numbered UH3. It's a 2007 Ford F-250 pickup truck. Has 89,000 miles on it and has rusted and broken at the bed frame just behind the rear window. So that truck is also available if you wanted to see it. It's in the parking lot next to the Detective Bureau by the community park. The truck has been there now for 6 months. We are not able to use it and fear that it may break further due to the rusted frame. This truck was on our replacement schedule for 2021. Although this isn't the first time you've heard about the truck, but the first time that it came up on the replacement schedule. And I'm asking authorization to purchase it through state purchasing. They have a bid number of 27AT for a 2021 Ford F-350 four-wheel drive white pickup truck at the amount of $32,613.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Mrs. Weiss.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a general question for Mr. Picorni. Do we get any benefit in terms of selling these old vehicles that we've listed and there'll be another one for parts, or do they just, what happens to the old vehicles?
Through the years, we've had a variety of things that happen to them. Some of them are picked up for junk, which is scrap pricing. Some people will buy them for that. Most of the time, though, other people have bought them in a used condition and then spend time repairing them. We've had a couple of vehicles go that way. Things like the leaf machine we just talked about, that'll probably go for scrap pricing. This one, although you might be able to repair the frame on it, it would not be able to carry loads normally that we would carry in it. So I would not recommend spending the money to repair it.
So out of these multiple vehicles that we're approving tonight, is there a estimate of how much we could get for whether scrap or parts or selling?
I did not put together an estimate. Generally, we use Gov Deals. We advertise anything that we're disposing of on Gov Deals, and it's a bid process.
Okay, so you think, I mean, roundabout, based on history, you think a few $1,000s we could get or more?
The dump truck, probably, you probably get $1,000 for the large dump truck, the 5-ton dump truck, is it's worth that as scrap. The leaf machine, maybe 500. This pickup truck, I don't know, you might get a couple $1,000s for the pickup truck.
Okay, so we might be able to get a few thousand for all these vehicles.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion?
So moved, Mayor.
Very good. Motion by Mrs. Wise to authorize the purchase of pickup truck for the Service Department for Middletown Ford Inc. of Middletown, Ohio through the State of Ohio Cooperative Purchasing Program in an amount not to exceed $32,613. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mayor.
Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Motion carries. Next is item K, authorization to purchase a Mack LR64 cab and chassis with 25-yard Heil Durapack 5000 rear loader rubbish packer from Bell Equipment Company, Gahanna, Ohio through the National Joint Powers Alliance, NJPA, in an amount not to exceed $240,783.60. Mr. Corney.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a replacement rubbish truck. We've had much discussion about this truck. 21-1. It's a 2000 year Mack, and with a 25-yard rear rubbish packer on it. This truck has been broken for over a year now. We've been utilizing it for parts. It was on our 2019 replacement schedule, but again, that was not done in 2019 or 2020. This truck is now sitting in the yard. We've taken the blades off of it, quite a few other things off of it. I don't know that it's even drivable anymore. However, it does need to be replaced in our fleet of rubbish trackers. As we had discussed in previous meetings, this would be a new one, so we would not plan on selling it should we change our method of collection. It would still be used for brush and or recycling or some other type of collection besides what the automated trucks would be if we started purchasing automated trucks. There are still 2 more of these 2000 vintage Macks left in our fleet. So we're not done with replacement, but I'm asking that we replace 21-1 this year and get us back up to strength so we have a spare rubbish truck when needed. The purchase, again, as the mayor had indicated, goes through NJPA, which is now Sourcewell Purchasing Cooperative, and it would be through Bell Equipment Company for $240,783.60.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? Mrs. Weiss.
None of us know what the results of the rubbish survey, will come back. It could be we keep the service the same, or it could be that we outsource or anything in between. Hypothetically, if it comes back that we decide that we are going to outsource, you're saying that this truck will not, will still be needed by the city for other services?
That is correct. We will use it for brush collection, or we will use it for other collections that we do, specials, things like that.
Okay, and we have 4 other trucks besides this one, correct?
We have 6 other trucks besides this one.
6, okay. I mean, I'm just wondering if it pays, did anybody think about leasing this vehicle with a lease buyout maybe at the end? I don't know if that's something to think about, just because the survey is up in the air right now?
We did look into that, and I will leave those issues to the finance director if he'd like to address financing and/or purchasing.
Yeah, I did. I did get some pricing for both installment payments over time, or as you said, Mrs. Weiss, a lease with a buyout provision at the end. I'm still waiting for a couple of those to come in from various banks and lenders, but I'd be happy to pursue those to come up with the most efficient way of acquiring the equipment. I think the motion or the authorization that's in front of you now is just to get the paperwork started to go ahead and buy this thing. But I'd be happy to get the details on the leasing arrangements to you probably next week.
So, I'd like to hear from my colleagues what their thoughts are also about purchasing versus leasing or some type of other financing in the interim.
I know that a number of other cities do sometimes lease these types of vehicles. Before, pulling the trigger on this, I'd like to see if there's a more economical way to do it. There may not be, but I'd like to see all our options.
For one, I'm ready to move on this. This is something that was budgeted in our budgeting cycle. It is an asset. If it's something that we're not going to do in the future, it's something that we could sell. I feel pretty confident that our method of trash pickup is not going to change anytime soon. And I think the results of the survey will indicate that. And it's going to be of great use for us. And if we decide down the road we change our method of pickup to an automated, this is something that we could retrofit. And I'm not comfortable outsourcing. So I'm ready to move on this.
I would just like to say that whether we change or don't change, there's a demonstrable need for this truck in the service department, and we've had interruptions in service due to other trucks being offline for service and having no backup. Usually the item that isn't done is brush pickup and yard waste. And anytime you've gotten a call from a resident, or if you've seen a post on social media about why they didn't pick up my bags today, or why did they sit as long as they did, chances are there's a tie between this and that. I would urge that we go ahead and approve it today.
I'm so inclined as well. I think that the need is there immediately. And, worst case scenario, if we end up with a different system in place, we can always sell it.
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion, and we'll see how that plays out for the purchase of for the authorization of the purchase of the Mack LR64 cab and the chassis with the 24-yard heel Durapack 5000 rear loader rubbish packer in an amount not to exceed $240,783.60.
Okay, very good. We have a motion by Mr. Rock. Is there a second?
I'll second. I would like to see when we do any of these future purchases, because we'll know in advance if Mr. Kennedy would continue to just, get an eye on what that might look like for us if we choose to do it differently in the future. But like Mr. Picorni said, if we do need it and it is budgeted, then I'll second the motion.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Second by Mrs. Blankfeld. Then, is there any further discussion on this? If there is no further discussion, Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss, Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. The motion carries. Next is item L, motion to hold an executive session immediately following this regular meeting for the purpose of discussing personnel, legal, and/or real estate matters. The administration has no matters to bring in executive session this evening. So Going from there, then we'll go to director's reports. Finance, Mr. Kennedy.
Mayor, just to get council up to date, we're finishing up the March reports. So I thought I was going to have those out today, but got sidetracked a little bit with the auditors, which I'll talk about in a moment, but I'll give you some highlights in terms of the securities portfolio. It maintained at Fifth Third. The balance at March 31st was $7,110,277.65. We've been incrementally adding funds to the portfolio through the beginning of the first quarter of 2021, and we'll continue to do so at least through the first half of the year. In terms of expenses for the general fund, our budget for the year is $15,447,938. Through March 31st, we spent $3,391,792.17. So that leaves us a little bit over $12 million of appropriation left for the balance of the year. And as a reminder, we still don't have any significant level of detail on the additional COVID money that will be distributed this year. Haven't received any further updates on the timing of the receipt, and still waiting for some more sophisticated guidance on what we will be permitted to spend the money on. For all funds, the budget for the year's $19,827,123. Year to date, we've spent $3,781,388. So that leaves us a little over $16 million. That's for all funds through the balance of the year. We obviously have encumbered some monies for expenses moving forward, but right now we look in pretty good shape. We started out with an unexpended balance in the general fund at the beginning of the year, $5.37 million. Currently, our unexpended balance is $5.89 million. So it's actually gone up during the first quarter of the year. From an all funds basis, our beginning balance was $9,036,000 and some change. Right now, our unexpended balance for all funds is $10,471,976. So our balances continue to go up. At least they have over the first quarter. It's a little bit muted because of the fact that we got all the first half property tax money from the county, and that really is spaced out over 6 months. We get the second distribution in July and August of this year. So even with that consideration for that, I think things are going well from a financial perspective through the end of the first quarter. I will get those reports out to everybody tomorrow and be happy to answer any questions from anybody on the reports or any of the detail that is provided. And as far as the audit goes, we did get a preliminary report from 2019 that will be sent out in draft to all the council members in the next day or so for your review. It's not a public document yet. The auditors control the release of that audit, but I was pleased with the results of the audit. We're also in the process right now of trying to get the 2020 audit done. Current target for that is mid-June to get that all finalized. And I have to have the CIC report down to the state by the end of April. So again, put that on everybody's radar. We probably need a CIC meeting this month, if at all possible. And we'll also take care of the appropriate Internal Revenue Service filings for the CIC. Those will be done in the next 30 or so days. So with that, be happy to answer any questions that anybody has about anything.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Any questions at this time for Mr. Kennedy?
I'd just like to thank Mr. Kennedy. We all know that, we have to be very careful financially, and I know we're in very good hands with you keeping an eye where we are on all fronts. This evening, we will have expended roughly $1,165,152 and change. So every meeting isn't like that, but with what we have, and we have 8 months to go, or 9 months to go, I appreciate having colleagues that are also fiscally mindful and responsible, and having you at the helm is comfort. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Blankfeld. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will thank Mr. Kennedy and move on to Director of Law, Mr. McConville.
Thank you, Mayor. As you alluded to earlier this evening, the Law Department has been working collaboratively with Chief Rogers on review of our lexipol policies surrounding use of force. We will be turning over revisions to those policies for consideration. And then ultimately, I think what the Citizens Committee will look at in their upcoming meeting will be quite different from what they were looking at initially when they performed their original review. And the Law Department will be delivering a report in connection with that review of ordinances. So that's something to look forward to, I guess. I want to mention that the state of Ohio, in particular, the Ohio Attorney General's office, is anticipating federal regulations that will come down soon in connection with 2021 COVID monies. I am attending a state-sponsored seminar that's intended to go over those regulations in the middle of May. So Mr. Kennedy and I will be able to work collaboratively with the administration to make sure that we're complying with federal guidance on what we can and cannot spend those monies on. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to council for passing the rental registration ordinance. I think it's an ordinance that the city can be proud of. I anticipate that it's going to meet the needs of the residents. And it was a long time coming, but now it's law, and that's something that we should be happy about. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. McConville. Any questions for Mr. McConville? Seeing none, we will move on to Public Safety Police. Chief Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one item to report tonight to council. Just for your awareness, the Police Department's 2020 annual report was uploaded to the city's website on the Police Department's webpage. If there's any questions going forward, be it from council or members of the public, for any additional discussions needed on any of the content, I'm always available. You can reach out directly to me to further discuss some of the content in that report. That completes my report.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Rogers. Any questions for the chief? Seeing none, we will move on to Public Safety Fire. Chief Perko.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. Also, one item to report tonight. We're going to be having a delay in our hydrant flushing program this spring. We anticipated to try to get this wrapped up towards the end of the month. The east side of the city is going to be affected by a water project that Cleveland Water is doing out of the plant over in Beechwood. So we will be unable to flush over on the east side of the city starting today for the next month. So we will continue flushing on the west side, and then we will update everyone in May when we're going to be starting again on the east side of the city. And that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chief Perko. Any questions for the chief? Seeing none, we will move on now to service. Mr. McCorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Only one item to report on, and that is our spring curbside loose leaf collection and brush. We have completed one entire pass of the city so far. We will get a second pass in before we're done. Hopefully we will get that done before the first week of May. And that's my report.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Any questions for Mr. Picorni? All right, then we will go to building. Mr. White. Mr. White, you're muted. Okay, well, we will perhaps come back to Mr. White. We'll go to City Engineer, Mr. Cheney.
One item to report on this evening, council, if you've driven around the northwestern portion of town, you'll notice that Dominion has started their gas line project. It's on Washington, Taylor, and Wynn Road up in the northwest section of town. They started this week. The schedule calls for them to be done sometime in mid-July. Sometimes they are a little bit difficult to deal with. If you get any complaints, please pass them my way or to Mr. Percorny so we can get them resolved as quick as possible. So going to be a disruption. As you know, these gas line projects, there's a lot of pipe, there's a lot of cones out there, there's a lot of digging. So there's over 13,000 lineal feet of pipe they're going to be replacing, and all the services, every 50 feet's another house that they have to replace as well. So any complaints you receive, please pass them on. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. Any questions for Mr. Cheney? Okay, very good. We'll go back to building. I see Mr. White is unmuted now. Fred, are you there?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just a comment. The mayor and I take all complaints that come into the Building and Housing Department very seriously. And at this time, we're in the process of investigating all complaints against the property at 2343 Miramar Boulevard, making sure that any renovations to that property, comply with zoning and building codes. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Any questions for Mr. White? All right, seeing none, we will move on now to communications and civic engagement. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening, everyone. I'll keep this short and sweet. 2 items to report this evening. One, the summer issue of Mosaic goes to the printer. Goes to the printer tomorrow. It's our summer issue. It is. It will include our summer guide, and it's a fun issue, but it's very informative. So I hope you all like it, and you'll be getting that no later than the second week of May. Secondly, our public service announcements are out, encouraging people to get the COVID-19 vaccine. You may have read about that, I think, this morning. It might have been yesterday in the Cleveland Jewish News, and there's also a story on it on Channel 3's morning show late last week. So if you haven't seen it yet, there are links to it on our social media, and it's also on our YouTube channel. That's it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Cook. Any questions for Mr. Cook? All right, seeing none. Economic Development has no report this evening, so we will now move to reports from standing committees. Building and Housing, Mrs. Blankfeld.
No report this evening, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Community Outreach, Mrs. Pardee is not here and was excused from this meeting. Does anybody from her committee have anything they want to report this evening? Seeing none, we'll move to Economic Development. Mr. Rock.
No report today.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. Finance, Mrs. Weiss.
We have a strategic planning committee, our monthly meeting, which will be in May. And we have we're not going to have a finance meeting yet until we figure out what the uses of the new federal funding will be. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. Recreation, Mr. Ertl.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. Safety, Mrs. Berry.
Just look forward to our Citizens Advisory Committee and the fact that we are going to get a report on our recommendations and Lexapol, and I'm looking forward to it. And I would encourage other council to join us on the 28th.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Berry. Next is Service and Utilities, Mr. Gould.
Thank you, Mayor. A draft version of the proposed survey for solid waste has been distributed to the administration and to members of council. And once their comments are used by Dr. Sutton to create a second draft. We'll have a meeting to discuss that survey further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Finally, Committee of the Whole, Mrs. Weiss.
Yes, there'll be a meeting next week. I believe it is on Wednesday. And no,
Is it Wednesday or Monday?
it's Monday. I'm sorry. It's April 26th. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So Monday, April 26th, 7 p.m. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Weiss. We are now at the conclusion of the regular portion of the meeting. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Good motion by Mr. Erdl. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right. Second by Mr. Rock. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Blankfeld,
Aye.
Mrs. Berry,
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss,
Aye.
Mr. Erdl,
Aye.
Mr. Rock,
Aye.
Mr. Gould.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Next regular meeting is May 3rd, Monday at 7 p.m. Have a good night, everyone. We are adjourned. Thank
Be
you.
well, everyone.